I'm one of those people that gets sort of annoyed because there's a lot of people that do all of this expensive marketing. Like I can do your SEO for $200 a month and all of that. And I do all my own SEO. Now, granted, I am in Albany, which is less competitive than, say, San Francisco, but I'm on the first page and have been, the whole time. So you can do this all on your own, and it's not as big of a deal as people make it out to be. So
this is Therapist Clubhouse, a podcast for private practice entrepreneurs. I'm Annie Schusler. This week, I'm talking to Cathy Hanville, a therapist, consultant, and private practice entrepreneur in Albany, California. Listen as we dive into Cathy's business helping other therapists build their practices, and an exciting collaboration the two of us have coming up, and how Cathy sets boundaries and creates a fulfilling and balanced life as an entrepreneur. Welcome, Cathy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm excited to talk to you about two aspects of your business. So you're a therapist and you also have a business helping therapists build their practices.
Yes.
And we have, drum roll, we have an exciting collaboration coming up.
Yes.
So I want to talk to you about how did you start getting into helping therapists build their practices?
Okay. So I started my practice in 2001, and it was a very not planned decision. I left a job suddenly, and my wife was like, start a private practice, not really loving all the social worky stuff I was doing at the time. So I sort of just jumped in with no plan, like exactly the wrong way to do it. And, the internet was not quite the thing in 2001 that it is now.
Yeah.
So I was lucky that I ended up connecting with a former colleague who was connected to San Francisco Access. I lived in San Francisco, and that's where I started my practice at that time. So I got emergency credentialed on the San Francisco Access. So I was working with foster care mental health, so kids in the system and their families, and then also people on Access. So because of that, I was able to have a sustainable practice right away, even though I did everything wrong. It worked out, and then of course, about a year after I started the practice, I moved to the East Bay and I commuted back to San Francisco for 10 years. And in 2011, it became the time to move my practice out here. So that's sort of when I started working with other therapists, because when I had to move, it's not I had one or two clients come with me, but for the most part, I had to rebuild everything in a different world. So I, learned to do my website, and I, learned SEO and, all of these things, and I was self-taught. So at that point, I started doing a little bit, kind of putting my toe into consulting with other people. And then a few years ago, I was asked to speak at San Francisco State. There was something for the students that was on, I think it was called The Business of Psychotherapy. And I was asked to speak at that, and I was asked to sort of talk about the nuts and bolts. And it got a tremendous response because, people aren't taught that. Mm-hmm. So people just loved it. So from there, I said, I'm going to turn that into a workshop. I had been doing some other workshops along the way, but that's probably one of my most popular workshops. And I love doing it, and people seem to get a lot out of it. And just, having somebody kind of tell you all the things you need to know, I didn't know I needed a business license when I started, all of those things, and just sort of kind of having it in one place and just talking people through that. Because of course you're really anxious when you start your practice. Mm-hmm. So it's just sort of taken off from there. It's kind of gone up and down over the years, kind of based on where I am at in my life. Right now it's doing really well. I'm getting a lot of individual consultations too. The groups, they come and they go. Last year I ended up doing 4 in September, which never happened. And then right now I'm kind of slow getting people to come, probably summer. Mm-hmm. So, I just sort of kind of ride with that. Mm-hmm. And, because of the work I'm going to be doing with you, I've been sort of energized to finally work on getting some of the stuff as online workshops too. So I've been, recording my slides and doing, working more on that right now, which I'm very excited about.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So we should tell people what we're doing together. So you are going to be teaching a lesson within the Superpower Method for Therapists program that I run this fall. And so, and your piece is at the end, and we're setting it up so that when folks get to your lesson, they're really ready because they've got their niches figured out. They've got a lot of copy written or rewritten, and they have a sense of where SEO might fit into their marketing plan. And then they're going to get your help with SEO. And so, and one thing I want to say is I really loved watching a little bit of the lesson that you're putting together because you're clearly so passionate about it and like what I call geeking out about SEO, which I was like, yes. And you're really excited clearly about what it can do for people. So yeah, how would you put it into words, like what people are going to walk out of your lesson with?
Well, what I hope is, and I mean, I'm excited about doing with you because unlike my own workshops, I think people are going to be further in the process and kind of have defined all of these things that they need to know. So what I hope is that at that point, they can sort of implement, there's a bunch of basic things you can do to improve your SEO. I'm one of those people that gets sort of annoyed because there's a lot of people that do all of this expensive marketing. Like I can do your SEO for $200 a month and all of that. And I do all my own SEO. Now, granted, I am in Albany, which is less competitive than, say, San Francisco, but I'm on the first page and have been, the whole time. So you can do this all on your own, and it's not as big of a deal as people make it out to be. So I think it's really scary to a lot of people, especially if you're not tech savvy. So I hope to make it, less scary and, give them a few concrete steps that they can take that should, improve their SEO right away.
Awesome. Yeah. And, people may have noticed this, that there's a lot of BS out there about SEO. There are a lot of people who are, selling themselves as SEO experts, charging a huge amount of money and you should be paid well for it, but some people charging, a really huge amount of money, I think kind of taking advantage of the fact that a lot of us don't understand SEO.
Yes.
So we'd rather throw a lot of money at it than get an understanding. So I'm really excited that you're going to be just helping people understand it, get less intimidated and figure out does SEO fit into my plan? And if so, what are the steps that I can take to have it working for me and to feel empowered with it?
Yeah. And SEO has to be part of everybody's plan. I mean, websites have to be part. I mean, I'm sure you cover that in what you're doing, but I mean, I've had clients come to me and say I can't believe how many therapists don't have a website.
Yeah. Yes.
And if you're Googling names and I have a website and you don't, they're going to come to me.
That's right. Yeah. So let's rewind a little bit and talk about your therapy practice a little bit more. So how long have you been in private practice now? How many years?
Since 2001, so 17 years.
17 years. Yes.
A long time.
Same as me. We've seen huge changes in terms of online marketing in that time, in terms of everything at that time.
Right.
And who are you seeing in your practice?
I specialize in, I do a lot of attachment sort of trauma work. But this is in my own sort of marketing. I market to anxiety because the people I see generally don't say I've had trauma in my past. Even people that have had pretty horrific, what I would define as pretty horrific trauma, say, when they fill out my kind of intake paperwork, say, yeah, no trauma. But they call and they say, I'm thinking about stuff all the time and I can't sleep. And that's how I marketed to anxiety. But I am level 2 EMDR trained, and I took Laurel Parnell's EMDR attachment training a few years ago, and it totally changed my practice. So for anybody that's listening that does EMDR, totally recommend it. So I do that. And then I also have a specialty, a gender specialty. So I work with a lot of trans and non-binary folk.
Cool. And how are people finding you?
So I would say probably 2 primary places. One is my website, just sort of straight looking on the internet. And the second is I do actually take some insurance, and I'm linked up with UC Berkeley Tang Center, which is where the students get their health services. So I get a lot of students, which I love. I love working with the students.
And is that why you're on that panel? so that you
Yeah,
get to.
I mean, it's one of the reasons. I mean, I know, like, there's a lot of people that are just private pay only. I think for a lot of the clients I see, like, private pay only is just, it's insurmountable. Like, these students, if somebody doesn't take their insurance, they are not going to see somebody. So it's part of my social work kind of thing. I want to see, especially, they're struggling so much, especially the ones, struggling with their gender or trying to navigate that system. So I was able to advocate for myself and get some raises with a couple of managed care plans. I used to be on a lot of them. Now I'm on 2, the ones I was able to get an increase on. And then the rest are private pay. So it's sort of a balance for me.
Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, do you partly get raises by being a gender specialist, which is, a qualification that a lot of people don't have?
Yeah, I mean, there's not necessarily an official qualification yet. I mean, they're starting the WPATH certification, which, I've taken the initial stuff and now we're sort of in limbo. But yes, actually, I mean, that's a really good point. When I went to Anthem to ask for a raise, they had just gotten the contract for the UC Berkeley students. So I wrote to them and said, hello, anxiety, gender, students, and they responded. I mean, I asked for a really big number, thinking like they're going to counter, and they did, but they actually didn't count. I thought they were going to counter with a very low number, and they just knocked it down a little bit. So, I mean, it's obviously still lower, but, you can get those raises with some companies. You have to be super persistent, though, too. I mean, I just got one with Aetna, and I was probably emailing them like every few weeks for a couple of months until they caved.
Okay, so persistence.
Yes, and you have to have something that they want. And, obviously, I knew that they had just gotten this big contract. And, anxiety is one of the, biggest issues on college campuses right now. So plus, adding the gender specialty. I think there's very few people that are paneled that have the gender specialty and then also take insurance. And, if you throw in the EMDR, I don't even know of the other person.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And so you're kind of mind mapping them, like thinking what's in it for them. What do they need me for, so that you could leverage that.
Yes.
That's awesome. And what do you charge in your practice?
For private pay clients? Yeah, I charge $140.
And how do you feel about your fee?
I have thought about raising it again recently. I probably will do that at the beginning of next year. I mean, I feel okay about the fee. I feel okay about, seeing the number of clients I do and making the living I do. So I'm also at a stage in my career that I'm sort of like, I only want to work so hard. So, I mean, that I think limits my income potential, but I'm okay with that, So.
Yeah. So when you say, this is interesting, because this is something we haven't really talked about very much on this podcast, is in any episode, is this idea of retirement. So when you say I'm at a point in my career, like, it makes me think that you're looking at eventual retirement.
Well, I'm a little young for that. And the way Social Security is going, there may never be retirement. But, a few years ago, I had one of those, years that, best be forgotten sort of thing. And it changed a lot of things for me. So, I used to be much more driven. And not that I'm not in some ways. I just, I don't want to work super hard. I don't want to work 50 hours a week. I want to see my 18 to 20 clients and do some of the stuff on the side. Like, with my consulting stuff, I have, no aspirations to be you. Like you do a lot and it's great. And I think, there's room for that. And especially people like you that are really like ethical and know their stuff, because there's a lot of, less so people. But, I'm not driven for that anymore. I just sort of want to have my, calm life. So yeah, I mean, I guess like retirement, but I'm not going to stop working.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So not so much necessarily even retirement, but just looking at quality of life as a huge priority.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my quality of life is a bigger priority than my work.
Nice. Nice. And so when you do think about, you're saying I'm not going to retire. Do you mean you're not going to retire anytime soon, or do you kind of see this work as something that you could imagine kind of doing forever?
It depends on the day. I mean, sometimes I'm like, oh, if I could retire now, I would. But I'm also a pretty active person, so I think that that's sort of one of those things that the grass is greener. I think a lot of it's going to, depend on health insurance and stuff like that. So I don't aspire to work into my 70s. I would like to be stopping somewhere by my 60s. If everything works out and I'm healthy enough to do it till then. But so that's still a long ways off.
Yes.
So a lot of it's just going to depend on life.
Totally. Yeah. Same with me. And some of my mentors who are now hitting definitely in their 70s, some of them, going into their 80s. I'm seeing a lot of them continuing to be therapists.
Yes.
And maybe changing their hours a bit or, scaling back. But so far, we'll see what happens. But so far, my mentors are not leaving the field, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great job that, I just met with a colleague who's maybe not in 70s yet, but probably going to work that long. And, I was like, oh my God, you're seeing more clients than I am. That's not good. We can if we want to. So, I think when I start to, that's, it's going to be dropping a day or two or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. And being a therapist is cool in that I figured this out for myself during some parental leave that I took and then coming back very part-time, that when you're someone's therapist, you are their full-time therapist. So like you can be a great therapist and work very part-time if it works for you. Like it's not like some other fields where if you're part-time, you're not taken as seriously or you're not considered 100% in your career. Like as a therapist, people don't actually know how many hours you're working. And when you're someone's therapist, you're their therapist. So it's kind of a neat opportunity.
Yes.
So let's see. What else do I want to ask you, Cathy? How, in that journey since 2001, have you had any low or scary moments in your business?
Honestly, I would say probably not.
Mm-hmm.
I think during the year that life was tougher, I made sort of a conscious decision to, scale back a little, and I was seeing less clients. But I've been pretty evenly, working as much as I wanted to pretty much the whole time. And that's again, I know the insurance thing is a thing that can be controversial. I always feel like I'm going to be judged for taking insurance by people. But it has allowed a consistency in clients that, even through the recession and stuff, I've always had clients.
Mm-hmm. And also it seems like your, everything that you learned to empower yourself with building your therapy practice probably accounts for some of that too, of not having to deal with dips that some people deal with.
Yeah, it's not like I don't have, some dips, but I've never, and over time, doing it this many years, like now I sort of know, in the beginning, it's like, oh my God, I only have 8 clients this week, and now I'm like, yes, I have 8 clients this week. I can get my target run done. I can do whatever.
Yes.
So, I definitely have a different attitude towards it, which I think helps.
Mm-hmm.
I track my numbers week to week. And I have, something with my monthly income in it, back, not quite to the beginning, but I think to 2009. So that also kind of helps me say like, okay, compared to then, I'm doing the same annually. Yeah. It just feels different right now. So
that's such a good reality check. I imagine that you do you check track your inquiries as well?
No, I actually don't track my inquiries. I'm in, and I could, and I probably should. But for the most part, with me, I'm lucky to be at a stage that I pretty much only take people like I really feel like are going to be a great match for me. Mm-hmm. I screen out a lot of people. I frequently, like right now, my message says no new clients because I just took a bunch of new clients and I want to settle with that. So a lot of times, maybe I'm not even getting the calls because I'm, chasing them away with my message. So, I kind of do it that way. But, for me, like, there's always the times that, you're not getting calls for a little bit, but they, then they always come back and you get 4 or 5 the next week. But I tend to see also people long-term, like I just closed with somebody yesterday I've been seeing for 5 years. Yeah. So, I don't necessarily have a lot of in and out of my practice.
Yes. And you obviously don't need to track inquiries. Like, I think it's such a great tool, especially when people are starting out, to be able to see in those anxious moments, to be able to see, okay, well, this many people called me last month and this many people the month before, so that they can kind of see the progression instead of just being in the moment of panic.
Right.
Yeah. What did you learn in that time that you were saying that, life became difficult? What did you learn about like boundaries around your business?
I learned, it's one of the reasons I think now I would say that I only take like really my ideal clients. Mm. And I've learned that if the client is not ideal, to either screen them out on the phone or, in that first session. Because I had, one client and, it wasn't a good match. And then, I've been engaged for a while and it was really painful, I think, for both of us. And I don't want to be in that position. So I'm very clear. Like I ask, some questions about, things that, don't work for me in my practice on my initial phone call, so that I can kind of screen out those things. So I really, really work on just taking my ideal client. I'm not in a place right now that I can take a client that's, actively suicidal or needs like a lot of phone support in between sessions. Like that's not my practice. I want that person to be with the person that can do that for them. So that's a lot for boundaries. And then, you also learn things like, I had an occasion where I had to drop everything and go back east at my family's from there, last minute. And I kind of learned that, okay, you can do that and your clients will, adapt to that and, everybody can kind of move on. And also when I came back, and this was also, I think, my wife pushing me on this too, took a few days for myself when I came back from dealing with what I had to deal with to regroup a little before I went back to work.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. And just to be a human.
Right. And, I think it's okay to be human with our clients. And, my clients were fine. A lot didn't, ask questions. Some had a few questions, but, they can get along without us for a week or two if, it has to happen, and people understand life happens. So, I think that was sort of a lesson for me with that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Years ago, I had a parental leave and I only had 2 weeks of warning or of knowledge before the parental leave, because, my kid is an adoptee and I was obviously over the moon, but also with my business was like, oh my God, you can't do this. You can't just tell people that you're, leaving at the last minute. And actually you can.
Yes, you can.
And actually you need to be able to, because, life needs to come first, or else what kind of therapists do we become?
Right. I had to call clients that day and say, I'm not seeing you this day and I won't see you next week. I'll see you the following week, and leave messages and stuff. And it's hard to kind of make those calls when you're, a little upset, but, I got through all of that and everybody was like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back to something you were talking about too, about those consult calls. I actually just got a question in the alumni community from the Superpower program yesterday, where someone was asking, like, how do I handle these consult calls when people ask me how I work? And for me, I've developed kind of a spiel that works for me, and that I can adjust a little bit depending on what the issue is. But I'm wondering for you, how do you handle those first consult calls? What are some of the things that you're keeping in mind as you talk to people for the first time?
So people, and I, market very specifically to this on my counseling website. People respond to it. I get a lot of connections through my website. Like people feel connected to me. Like I just got this new person who's like, like just devoted to me from like the first session, which is, slightly nerve wracking too, but, got the connection from the website. And I think the thing on the website that connects them to me the most is me saying, I'm very interactive. Mm-hmm. Like I'm a social worker. I come from that perspective and I'm interactive. And I can't tell you how many clients I've had come to me that said, my last therapist never said anything. Mm. And, maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but, maybe not so much. And clients, and I think even more so now, like people want, real interactive engagement. I mean, some people say that they want it and then maybe not so much. But for me, people want like to talk through their problems, like and have a dialogue and be heard. So when people ask me how I work on my call, that's generally what I say. I'm a social worker, I'm interactive, and I focus on that because, the clients that are going to work well with me, that's what they want. And if somebody wants somebody who's a little quieter or psychodynamic, then I'm not a good match for them, and they should, work with somebody who, is a better match for them.
Mm-hmm. And so you're telling them, and I'm imagining you're also showing them with just how you're interacting with them on the call.
Yeah. And then I think when they come in and see me, I think that, I think people resonate with me. I mean, I think even with my consulting business too, when you kind of talked about the geeking and the SEO, I mean, people resonate with me because I'm very real, very authentic. Mm-hmm. And I think that, is also with my counseling practice. Like, I'm very real with them. Like, I have limits around my self-disclosure and stuff, but as far as who I am in the room and how I am, what's on my face or whatever, I'm there with them and they know that. And they want that.
That makes sense. That makes me think of like in our first conversation, like I had been aware of you and thought, oh, that's cool what Cathy's doing, but I'm a total introvert. So I had never reached out to you before. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to reach out to Cathy. And then we got on Zoom together just to have like a, virtual coffee.
Right.
And then within a few minutes, I was like, oh, you should be on the podcast. And, oh, you should teach in my course, and it just all kind of happened in the moment. I think because I was getting a sense of you as a person. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is my strength in my work. And, you say you're an introvert, but you still reached out. I would have never reached out to you because I was like, she's like a superstar.
Oh my God. Oh my God. You're so sweet. So if you could time travel to the start of your private practice back in 2001, mm-hmm. What do you think? I mean, you've done everything pretty well, so maybe you wouldn't have a lot of advice for the past you, but what do you think you would tell the Cathy of that time?
I would have worked on, and some of this is personality and age and growth. So, but worked on the anxiety about the ups and downs. When I first started practice, I worked with a lot of foster care, mental health, and Medi-Cal clients, and you cannot charge them for no-shows. And, they tend to be a population that has a harder time getting to an appointment regularly and on time. And my boundaries weren't always great. And some of that, was I worked with kids and, they had a guardian bring them and it's not the kid's fault. And you feel bad about abandoning the kid. And it just makes it complicated. Mm-hmm. But I would have had like better boundaries around those things, earlier on and been more consistent in enforcing them. I did find my way to that, but it was hard. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Okay.
That I would do differently.
Very wise. So Cathy, if people come and sign up for the course, they're going to get to work with you. They're going to get to have a 90-minute Q&A call with you, or they get to ask you everything about SEO in their practice, which is pretty awesome. And besides that, so that's one place where people can mm-hmm. get to find you and throw compliments at you during that Q&A call.
Right.
But besides that, where's the best place for therapists to find you and throw compliments at you and get to learn more about you?
My consulting website is at getdowntobusinessconsulting.com, a bit of a mouthful. So everything about my consulting and different classes and stuff is on there. So that's probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Okay.
And then my email's on there, but it's Cathy at getdowntobusinessconsulting.com. And yeah, if I could do it over again, I probably would have gone with a shorter name, but I had to add the consulting in order to get the domain names that I could afford. So
yes,
I would have just gone with Get Down to Business, but
awesome. Thank you so much, Cathy.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Registration for the Superpower Method for Therapists group program is open just until this Thursday, September 20th. So that's just 2 days away from today if you're listening on the day that this is released. We'll go through a 12-week process together. You'll get clear on your right fit clients and your niche. You'll identify your superpowers and how to use them in your business. You'll create a marketing plan based on those superpowers and those right fit clients, and you'll figure out where your practice is going next. As you just heard, you'll learn from Cathy about how to use SEO in your marketing plan. To hear what some participants have to say about how the program has impacted their businesses, go to coachingwithannie.com and click on the Superpower Method. If it's time to build your business into something unique and profitable, let's get started. You're going to have 7 homework assignments designed to help you transform your business, one due roughly every other week. You'll have 7 Q&A calls with me and sometimes with guest teachers, including Cathy one time and a financial expert another time. You'll get an individual consult with me, and you'll have 8 bonus office hours calls with Superpower coaches who are there to support you and answer your questions. Then you'll get free ongoing support in our exclusive alumni program after the 12-week program ends. So as you can hear, we have really prioritized giving you a ton of support in this program because we want to set you up to follow through and succeed. So go to coachingwithannie.com, click on the Superpower Method to learn more and enroll. I'll see you next week. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. The mail carrier comes once a day, obviously, and it's usually not until 11. So I thought we were going to be okay, but he's going to stop barking in a minute. I'm so glad we're not live.